Hi everybody, Miss Lorette here. I'm going to walk you guys through lesson 2 of section 3.3. We're still covering multi-step equations with variables on one side, and in this particular lesson we're going to look at examples that have fractions. So you're going to want something to write with, something to write on, and ideally a calculator that can work with fractions. Since I'm going to be walking you guys through these examples, showing you how to use a calculator as a tool to assist you through these types of problems. So most of the teachers at NFA, the math teachers, have these types of calculators, the Texas Instrument scientific calculators. So if you have one of these, this is just a reminder of how to work with fractions on that type of calculator. The type of calculator that I'm actually using today is a Sharp calculator. It kind of functions the same way in the sense that I'm still going to enter the numerator first of my fraction. I have to type a button that says ABC and then type the denominator. So the calculator that I'm using is going to do it the same way that this calculator is doing it. If you have a different type of calculator than this one on the screen or this one that I'm holding up in front of the camera, then you may just have to play around with it to see how to work with fractions on that calculator. So let's take a look at an example here. Whoops, that was from my take 2. Just going to erase that and start over. So go ahead and take a moment to copy this equation in your notebook. I'm going to draw a line down my equal sign. Again, this really isn't a step that's necessary, but it does help just visually to separate the equation into two sides. And remember that now that we're solving multi-step equations, things that are harder than your typical 2-step or 1-step, there's a few steps that we go through before we can actually solve. So the first thing that we want to look for are parentheses. And if we see parentheses, we use the distributive property. So step 1, we distribute if necessary. Once we distribute, or if we don't need to distribute, we move on to step 2, and that's combining our like terms. So you may just want to recopy all of this down in your notes if you don't have it memorized. Remember that if we are combining like terms, we're looking for terms that have the same variable factors. That's a fancy way of saying if it's a number that's attached to a variable, it can only be added or subtracted with numbers that have that same variable. If it's a number that does not have a variable, we call that a constant, and it can only be added or subtracted with other constants. Once we've done all of the simplifying steps that are necessary, we can move on to solving. When we solve, we use inverse operations, like when we were solving 1- and 2-step equations. So if we have a constant, we're going to undo the constant first. Again, that constant is the number not touching the variable. It's by itself. And to undo it, we add or subtract it from both sides. So we do whatever the opposite sign is in relation to that constant. If we don't have a constant, or we've taken care of the constant, we move on to the last step, and that's to undo the coefficient. That's the number that is touching the variable. It's being multiplied or divided. So to undo it, we're going to multiply or divide. And specifically when we're working with fractions, typically when we get to this step, it's not going to be division really. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So that might be something that you want to add in. When we're working with fractions, we multiply by, we multiply by the reciprocal. Reciprocal. Hopefully I spelled that right. All right, so looking at this equation, and hopefully you've taken some time to copy it down, I don't see any parentheses, so I don't need to distribute, but I do have some like terms. This has a variable v, and this has a variable v. So I can actually combine these. So using my calculator, again, since I'm working with fractions, I'm going to use that ABC button. I'm going to type 1 ABC 4 plus, because I'm just taking that 1/4 and I'm adding it to 5/2, 5 ABC 2, and it's giving me a mixed number. So depending on your calculator might give you a mixed number, or it might give you an improper. Either is fine. So I'm going to bring this negative 11 halves down, and my calculator is telling me that when I add these two fractions, I get 2 and 3/4 v. Don't forget that that has a variable on it. Now, if your calculator is doing like mine and it's giving you an improper, or excuse me, it's giving you a mixed number like this, before I can continue to isolate my variable here, which is what I want to do since it's the only thing I have, I've got a number touching a variable, so that means it's the coefficient. Before I do that, I'm going to actually turn this into an improper, so that way I can do this step and multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So remember, to change a number from a mixed number to an improper, we start at the denominator of 4. We're going to multiply with that whole number and get 8. And then we're going to add that result with the numerator, and that's going to give us our new numerator. So 8, 9, 10, 11, and our denominator stays the same. So if you've got a calculator that just automatically tells you it's an improper fraction, then that's actually good for you. You can just skip this step. Otherwise, you'll want to do what I did here. Okay, so now I've got a number touching a variable. That means they're being multiplied. We know that the inverse of multiplying is to divide, but again, when we're working with fractions, we're actually going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. The easiest way to think of a reciprocal is you're just flipping that fraction upside down. We're just doing keep, change, flip, essentially. My variable is now going to be by itself. And on the left, I can, again, use my calculator to help me. So I'm just going to clear it. I'm going to do 4ABC11 to type in the 4 over 11 times a negative 11 ABC2. So you want to be careful when you're typing the negatives on your calculator. The scientific calculator that I showed you on a previous slide, that Texas Instrument one, the negative is a separate button from the minus button. It's the same on my calculator. The negative is a separate button from the minus button, and I have to make sure to type that first. Even if this negative was down here with the denominator, really it's just saying that this whole entire fraction, which is just one number, is a negative. So you got to type that negative first. I'm going to hit enter, and it's telling me that my product is an integer. I'm getting -2 as my final answer. So that's how to do an equation like this using the calculator as a tool to help you. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Go ahead and take a moment to copy it in your notes, and notice that in this one we've got more terms and we've got a mixed number here. So we got to really take our time and be careful here. Okay, so I'm just going to draw my line down my equal sign just like last time. And again, the first thing that we want to look for is, do we have parentheses? If we do, we need to distribute first. I don't see any parentheses anywhere, so I can skip that step. The next step is to combine like terms. Well, if I look on the right side, I've got multiple terms. I've got a variable term, a constant, and another constant. So these two constants here, -1 and +2 and 2/3, I can combine these. So again, I can use my calculator. So I'm just going to clear it. So the 1 is negative, so I got to type that first. -1 plus 2 and 2/3. Now, the Texas Instrument calculator that I showed you, as well as my calculator, I can type mixed numbers. If you can't type mixed numbers easily into your calculator, you would do like I did on the previous page, and you could make this mixed number improper by multiplying first to get a 6, and then adding that 6 with the numerator to get 2. If you're using a calculator that can type a mixed number like mine, you still use the ABC button. You just type the ABC button after the whole number. So I'm going to type the whole number of 2, ABC, and then I use the ABC button again to type the fraction. 2, ABC3, enter. So I'm doing -1 times 2 2/3 in my calculator, and it's giving me a mixed number. I'm just going to copy everything else down first that I didn't do anything with yet. That's what you should do. I'm getting a +1 2/3. So I'm going to write +1 2/3. Okay, so at this point, I just want to check if I can simplify anything else. It doesn't look like I can. I don't have parentheses, and these are not like terms. So I'm ready to move on to my solving step. My solving step says that I need to undo this constant, the number not touching the variable, before I can take care of what is. To undo it, I do the opposite sign. I see a +1 2/3. I'm going to subtract 1 2/3. These are going to cancel on the right, leaving me with a -7/2 times n. And on the left, again, I can use my calculator as a tool to assist me. I'm going to type the -23/24 first. So -23, ABC 24. Then I want to subtract 1 2/3. So -1 ABC 2 ABC 3. So that's actually going to type in my mixed number. And that's telling me that I get an answer of -2 5/8. It's giving me a mixed number here. So once we're at this step here, again, I could make this an improper if I want to, especially for those that don't have calculators that can work with mixed numbers easily. Let's go ahead and do that here. I can work with the mixed number in my calculator, but just as practice, let's actually make this improper before we keep going. To do that, I'm going to take this 8, multiply it with my whole number, and get a 16, and then add that result with 5. It's still going to be a negative when I convert like this. And then 16 plus 5 is going to give me 21 for my numerator. Denominator stays the same. So here's the equation that we're looking at. Okay, so we've got a fraction touching the variable. That means multiplication. I want to do the inverse. And remember, when we're dividing by a fraction, what we're really going to end up doing is multiplying by the reciprocal. So take that fraction, flip it upside down. It'll still be a negative. And what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I'm going to do times -2/7 here as well. I'm going to have to continue my work off to the side here. My n is alone on the left, or excuse me, the right, and I'll use my calculator as a tool to help me to get my final product on the left. They're both negative, so be careful. -2 ABC 7 is how I type -2/7, and then I type times -21 ABC 8, and it's giving me a fraction, a positive fraction of 3/4. Here's my final answer. So it just takes a little bit of time to kind of get good with converting fractions from mixed to improper, as well as utilizing your calculator to assist you. That can take a little practice too. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Go ahead and copy this one in your notes. And again, you might want to draw a line down your equal sign. I don't see parentheses, so I don't have to distribute here, but I do have a couple of constants again. I have a -2/3 and a +3/4. So my first step is going to be to combine those. So I'm just going to use my calculator. -2 ABC 3 plus 3 ABC 4. If I press enter, that's telling me that I'm getting a +1/12. And I'm just going to bring down that 2/3 x, as well as everything else that I haven't done anything with yet. Okay, so there's no distributing. I combined my like terms. I'm ready to solve this as a two-step. I have to undo this constant first. It's positive, so I subtract it. We always do the opposite of the sign when we're undoing a constant. I'm going to bring that 2/3 x down and use my calculator to help me find my difference here. 25 ABC 12 minus 1 ABC 12, and that's going to give me an integer of 2. And at this point, I'm now looking at a 1-step. 2/3 is getting multiplied with this x. Instead of dividing, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. We always do the reciprocal to undo a fraction that's being multiplied with a variable. When I do this, they're going to cancel on the left. And to get my product on the right, I'm just going to use my calculator here. 2 times 3ABC2, and I get a nice integer here. I get positive 3. I believe I've got 1 or 2 more that I'm going to walk you guys through, and then I'll give you some to try on your own. Go ahead and copy this one down in your notes. Again, you might want to draw a line down the equal. I don't see parentheses, so I can skip that step. So I'm going to look to see if I have any like terms. I have a 1r, so I've got a variable term, and then I've got a constant of 1/2 and a constant of 3 2/3. So I can combine these two. So I'm going to do that first. My 1r is just going to come down in the next step. And then to do the constants, I'm just going to type 1ABC2 plus 3 ABC, that's the whole number of my mixed number, 2 ABC 3, and that's the fraction part. It's giving me a mixed number. It's a positive, so I have to write plus 4 1/6 equals 17/3. Again, your calculator might be giving you an improper here. That's okay. Either is fine. I have to undo this constant first here. The opposite of adding 4 1/6 is to subtract it. These will cancel on the left. I'm left with 1r equals, and again, I can just use that ABC button, 17 ABC3 minus, and I'll type this as a mixed number, 4 ABC 1 ABC6, and that's going to be 4 1/6, and I'm getting a mixed number as my answer. I'm getting 1 1/2. Now, you might be thinking that we need to get rid of this 1, which is a coefficient. You can, but it's not going to change the answer. If we multiply or divide both sides by 1, it will not change the result. Remember that a 1 touching a variable, just like back up here, it's the same thing as that variable alone. So I can actually just ignore that 1 and not use any inverse operations here at all. Now, again, your calculator might give you an improper, so this is an acceptable answer. Or if your calculator is giving you an improper, here's how it's going to look. It's going to be r equals 3/2. These two answers are the same thing. Either is acceptable. Okay, I think this is the last one that I'm going to walk you guys through, and I believe the next slide has my you try. So let's go ahead and copy this one in our notes. Notice right away that this one looks a little more complicated. Again, you might want to draw your equal down the line, or your line down the equal sign. And what's different about this equation versus all of the others that we've done is that we have parentheses here. When we see parentheses, we must distribute first. Remember that when we distribute, we're taking that number that's touching the parentheses and we're multiplying. Okay, we're multiplying to each of the inside numbers. You can use your calculator to help you with this. This is going to be a calculator friendly lesson today. I'm just going to bring down my negative 35, and I'm going to start using my calculator to multiply here. Careful with that fraction on the outside. It's a negative 7/2. So when I type it in, I must type the negative first. Negative 7abc2 times 8abc3, and that's giving me a mixed number. It's giving me negative 9 1/3. And don't forget, this has a k attached to it, so I want to include that. I'm now going to take this negative 7/2 and multiply it with the 10/3. Negative 7abc2 times 10abc3 equals another mixed number. It's negative 11 2/3. Again, your calculator might be giving you impropers here. So your work right here might look a little different than mine. That's okay. If your calculator is giving you mixed numbers, this is going to be negative 28/3. And this will be, let's see, that's going to give me 33, 34, 35. That's going to be a negative 35/3. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going with what I have here, though. I have to undo the constant before I can undo the coefficient. The number not touching the variable is my constant. It's a negative, so I'm going to add it to get rid of it. I'll do the same thing over here. To do this, I'm just going to use my calculator. Negative 35 plus, and then to do that mixed number, I'm going to type the whole number first, 11, ABC2, ABC3, and I get another mixed number. It's going to give me negative 23 1/3 equals negative 9 1/3 times k. Remember, this fraction touching the variable, this means multiplication. So again, in order to multiply by the reciprocal, before I can find the reciprocal, I should make this improper. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and make both of them improper. It's good practice. So to make this fraction on the left improper, I'm going to take this denominator and multiply it with the 23. You may actually want to use your calculator for these steps here. That's what I'm going to do. 3 times 23 will make that a 69, which I then add to the numerator. And this gives me an improper fraction of negative 70/3. Remember, that denominator stays the same and the sign stays the same. Over here, I'm going to multiply 9 times 3. That's going to give me 27. And I'm going to add that result with the numerator to make it a 28. But it's still going to be a negative. And my denominator is still going to be a k. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Okay, now I'm at the final step. I'm close to isolating my variable. To get it alone, I have to do the opposite of multiplication. But when we do that, we're not really going to divide by this fraction. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. It's still going to be a negative, but I'm just flipping these numbers around. These will cancel. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. So times negative 3/28. I'm going to have to write this off to the side here. So I've got k on the left, or excuse me, the right. I made the same mistake last time. I've got k on the right, and I'll use my calculator here to help me. Negative 3 ABC28 times negative 70 ABC3. Remember, you have to type that negative before you type the numerator of the fraction. And I get a positive mixed number. I get 2.5. Or again, if your calculator is giving you an improper, it's going to be 5/2. Either one is correct. Okay, so here's what I would like you to do at this point. I'd like you to pause the video, give these a try, and then when you unpause the video, you should see some solutions. Okay, so here's what you should have gotten as your final answers. You should have gotten negative 2/3 equals A for number one. And if you got a mixed number for number two, you should have gotten negative 2 2/3. If you got an improper as your answer, depending on how you wanted to write it or how your calculator's writing it would be negative 8/3. For number one, you want to combine your like terms first. That's going to give you 4 and 1/4, or 17/4, depending on how your calculator writes it. If you get a mixed number, it's ideal to make it improper first by multiplying and then adding. And then from there, multiply both sides by a reciprocal to get that variable by itself. For number two, we've got parentheses here. So the first thing you actually need to do here is distribute. Take this negative fraction that's touching the parentheses and multiply it with each of the inside numbers. When you do that, your first product is going to be a negative 10. The second product, be careful, this second number in the parentheses is actually a negative number. So when you do this in your calculator, you're doing negative 10/3 times a negative 3/2. That's going to give you a positive product, and I got positive 5. From here, I've got two numbers that I need to get rid of using inverse operations. I undo the constant first by subtracting. I got a mixed number. I decided to make that mixed number improper. And I also made this negative 10 a fraction so I could easily multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Using my calculator here for this last step, I got a mixed number, or again, improper is also fine. And I believe that is pretty much it. Yep, there's no more slides here. Right? Yeah. So hopefully you found this helpful. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your teacher. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.